Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of Stories with Jim Sedore. As a businessman, Jim shares his experiences and life lessons, and as a minister, he shares his knowledge and wisdom gained from years of study and a close walk with God. So sit back for a few minutes as Jim delivers yet another nugget of wisdom for daily life.
And welcome back to our last installment of Denomination, Abomination. I am your host, Jim Sedore. This is the game show that is sweeping the country, in my opinion, but as far as the network is concerned, I have been advised that this will be our last show, and after that we will be canceled. So the last show is about the Lord's Supper, and we are going to look at the Lord's Supper as we did the other major doctrines, God, Holy Scripture, salvation, and baptism. And we're going to look at it based on what 8 different denominations perceive as their take on these major doctrines. And today is the Lord's Supper. So we're going to go again in the same order that we have been: Baptist, Catholic, Church of Christ, Episcopal, Lutheran, Methodist, Pentecostal, and Presbyterian. So let's start with Baptist and the Lord's Supper. The Lord's Supper is a symbolic act of obedience whereby members of the church, through partaking of the bread and fruit of the vine, memorialize the death of Christ and anticipate his second coming. And our strange critic underneath that writes, okay. And we go over to what Catholics believe about the Lord's Supper, and it says, the Eucharist, or Mass, is the central act of worship. The sacrament reenacts Christ's death and resurrection in ritual form. The actual body and blood of Christ are believed to be present in the elements. It's called transubstantiation, celebrated daily. And under this, our wonderful critic writes, WHOA, W-H-O-A, with an exclamation point. Let's go over to the Church of Christ and see what these folks believe. The Lord's Supper is an ordinance with a threefold meaning, including memorial meal commanded by Christ, proclamation of Christ's death for sins, and a time for examination of commitment to Christ, observed only on Sunday at the church each week. And under that, surprisingly enough, he writes, okay. I don't particularly agree with that, but this is his game. Episcopal. The Holy Eucharist is the sacrament commanded by Christ for the continual remembrance of his life, death, and resurrection. Until his coming again, the elements of bread and wine are received by those claiming Christ as Savior, and under that, he writes, okay. Let's go to Lutheran. Holy Eucharist is one of 3 sacraments, including baptism and absolution. Celebrated corporately, Eucharist is the real presence of the body and blood of Christ through sacramental union. When received in faith, grace through the Eucharist works forgiveness of sin, life, and salvation. And this is the best. Underneath this guy writes, yipes, Y-I-P-E-S. That is beautiful. And I could not agree more with that. Holy crow, where did I get that from? Under Methodist, the Methodists believe that the Lord's Supper is a sign of love that Christians should share and a sacrament of our redemption by Christ's death. As a symbol of the Lord's Supper represents Christ's work of atonement. As a sacrament, the Spirit of God works through the bread and grape juice to call to mind Christ's death and is open to all Christians. He does not have anything under that. I don't know why. He did underline grape juice, though. I guess that's funny. I would assume that he didn't particularly agree with the Methodists there. Pentecostals, let's see what these folks say about the Lord's Supper. It's a command of Christ to be obeyed in remembrance of Christ's death and sacrifice on the cross. The elements are symbolic of the spilled blood and the broken body. The supper is a time for individual examination and may be accompanied by foot washing. And under that he says, okay. Foot washing, huh? You know, that sounds reasonable, I guess. You know, the Lord did that for the disciples. Well, that's pretty cool. Now, the very last one is the Presbyterians, and let's see what they say. The Lord's Supper is a sacrament in that the Spirit of God works in the believer who calls Christ's work of redemption, reflects on his or commitment to Christ, and participates in the priesthood of believers by passing the bread and cup. The Lord is the host of the supper, and all who trust him may partake. And this is good. He writes under that, really? With a question mark. That's really cool. He did this. This fellow writes or underlined, the Lord is the host of the supper. Well, that's curious. Well, folks, it has been a lot of fun to read you the critiques of this no-name Bible owner. For me, it's been pretty interesting. And it really does show you that, you know, as human beings, we just can mess it up big time. So thanks very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing it for you. God bless you all.
We are so glad that you could join us again today for this edition of Stories with Jim Sedore. Jim invites you to be a partner with him simply by signing up as one of his followers right here on the page. And as always, we value your response. Simply click on the word comments at the bottom of this post and type in the box provided. Please join us again next time and have a great week.